Hi everybody, I'm Nick and I'm here today with Patrick & Friends Music Company. And today I'm going to be talking about how to get the most from your pedal board. I thought I would start off today by talking about my own pedal board and how I've wired it. And I thought I'd also cover a few common mistakes that people make when they're setting up their own rigs at home. So one of the first things I want to talk about here is patch cables. Now there are two kinds of patch cables that you see very often. One is soldered cables and the other is solderless cables. Now, solderless cables can be really popular because you can cut them on your own really easily and you don't have to worry about soldering. But personally, I prefer using soldered cables. I use these things right here. They're called EBS cables and they're flat and they're really easy to use on your own. I usually just buy a few different lengths and I'll use them in different places on my pedal board. If you look down here, you can see this little Velcro thing down here. And basically, it's this super strong Velcro stuff that I use for all my pedals. If you look here, it's attached to the bottom. And that's what I use to keep all my pedals in place. Most people use Velcro, but you'll notice if you ever have to do like a fly out or anything where your pedal board is being handled by somebody else, you're going to notice that TSA is going to rip these apart pretty often. And so the dual lock just keeps everything in place. I really like that. It's been kind of a game changer for me. Let's go ahead and just start off on the pedals that I have here. The first one that I go into is my PolyTune tuner. And it does what any tuner should do. It makes sure that my guitar is in tune. But it also has a really important function that I like a lot, which is that it has a buffer in it. Now, if you've never heard of a buffer before, this is something that kind of helps your guitar get its signal all the way through all this myriad of different pedals that we have here. If you're like me and you're using a lot, you're going to need something like this. What you'll notice is it's actually pretty subtle, but you can lose some top end the more pedals that you go through. So you're going to want some sort of a pedal with a buffer in it. So I run into this PolyTune right here, and that runs into this compressor first. Compressors are something that can be really controversial in the guitar world. Some folks really love them and some people hate them. Personally, I really like having one. I don't use it all the time, but I tend to use it when I want to play completely clean, without any overdrive or anything like that, and still have a decent amount of sustain and kind of squish to my notes. So here's what that sounds like. For reference, here it is without it. So it's pretty subtle. Typically I'll set it to where it has a little bit of a volume boost so it helps it push out, but I like using the compressor a lot. So the next pedal on my pedal board here is the Walrus Audio Kangra. And this is probably the craziest sounding pedal on my board. This is what it sounds like on its own. So it's pretty wild and I don't actually get to use it very often. But what I do use it for is mostly this envelope filter effect. It's really cool, especially if you like John Mayer and what he does with the Qtron. I use this all the time. So that's that, and then I'll sometimes throw a little bit of overdrive in front of it. It sounds like this. Sounds really good to me, and I way overuse that pedal. So the next pedal on here is the JHS Double Barrel. This is actually one of my favorite pedals of all time, and what it is a dual overdrive pedal. So this has two different kinds of overdrive circuits in it. Both really, really common in the guitar world. The first one is a blues breaker type circuit. I'll go more into detail about these later in another video, but for right now, all you need to know is that this is a mostly transparent overdrive, meaning it doesn't color my tone too much. I like to leave this one on a lot of the time. So as you can hear, it doesn't add a ton of saturation, but it just kind of makes my amp sound like it's being pushed a little bit more than it is. Then the other side here is a tube screamer circuit. You'll notice this one is a lot more saturated than the blues breaker, and it's really good for when you're going in and playing some like bluesy kind of solos. Here's how this one sounds. So you can hear there's a lot more saturation, which makes it not quite as good for chords. What I like to do really often is I'll be using this side just on its own as an always on. And then when I go to take a solo, I'll turn on the tube screamer and it works great. It gives me a little bit more volume and a little bit more of a mid push that helps my sound kind of punch past the band. So not too much overdrive, but it just kind of gives me a little bit of extra something for when I'm going in for a solo. So the next pedal in the chain here is this pedal called the Dude, and this is my high gain overdrive pedal. This is probably the most saturated pedal on the whole thing, and that's what makes it great for high gain situations. This is basically meant to emulate a Dumble Overdrive Special amp, which is an amp that costs about $1 million. So what us guitar players do to kind of emulate that sound is we buy pedals that sound like it instead. Sometimes when I'm going in for a really big solo sound, I'll throw in another overdrive behind it, and it just kind of adds a little bit more clarity to that really dark sound that the pedal has on its own. So here's what it sounds like. Sounds really, really good. And then the last pedal in this kind of drive section is this thing with the big old Boost logo on it, and you can probably guess what that does. It's a boost pedal. Now, what I like about this is it doesn't add anything to the overall sound. It just makes it way louder. So, what I use this for, really there's two situations. First off, we've all been in that situation where we've been playing with a band and we go to take a solo and we're just not quite loud enough. This is like, when you turn this on, it's basically like turning up the volume on your amp just a little bit. The other thing I use this for is actually this really cool function that it has, which it has this expression jack on it. So what that means is I can take any expression pedal, like this one right here, and I can use it as a volume pedal without having to run my signal through a passive volume pedal like this. So check it out. That's it. It's good to have. The other reason I really like having that there is because I tend to set my volume pedal before my reverbs and all that stuff, but after my overdrives. This is actually pretty important. It's something I didn't learn about until much later on. So the idea here is if I use my volume pedal after my overdrives, I can back off the volume a little bit without actually losing any overdrive. So check this out. Let's say I turn on like a lot of stuff and I go to solo and it's just way too loud. That happens a lot, right? I can back this off a little bit. I have just as much gain, but it's way quieter. That comes in handy super often. So that leads us to the top part of my pedal board. This is kind of the fun stuff. This is the reverb, delay, and modulation. So first off, taking a look at this here, you'll notice that there's something in common between all of these, which is that they're all multifunctional pedals. The reason for this is if you're like me and you're doing a lot of gigs and playing a lot of sessions and stuff like that, you end up having to use a lot of different sounds. And so having different pedals that have all these different sounds inside of it, it's just really helpful. I highly recommend if you're getting into doing a lot of work with different bands and stuff, considering getting something like this because it really kind of helps expand your horizons as far as tones you can go for. So let's start off with the Mobius here. This is a multi-modulation pedal. And basically it has like all the choruses and all that kind of stuff in it. Here's the chorus sound. Really, really common sound that you need to use a lot. Another one is the phaser. I use that one a lot. And then my personal favorite here is the rotary sound. I really like that one a lot. And the great thing about the Mobius here is it actually has this button where you can change the speed of the Leslie. It's awesome. I use that a whole lot. The next one is the Timeline. So this is my delay pedal. And just like the Mobius, it has all sorts of different sounds inside of it. I way underutilize this one. I mean, occasionally when I'm doing a session, I'll use like some crazy delays and stuff. But for the most part, I tend to use the analog and tape sounds. So just for a little bit of reference, here's the analog sound. Just a really dark, subtle sound. And then I use the tape a lot for more ambient stuff. So next up is my reverb pedal. This is actually a new one for me. This is called the Ventris. And again, I use this mostly for kind of more subtle, natural reverb. This is a spring reverb, which is basically like a a Fender amp kind of built-in reverb. Another one I like to use a lot is this more subtle plate. Mostly really subtle stuff, but occasionally I like to use the really ambient stuff. This one right here. That stuff is great. And then using them all together, we get some really great sounds. Let's do some chorus here. All right, so that was my pedal board. I hope that was helpful for you guys back at home who are working on your own pedal boards. Remember, if you like this video and you want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe, and also check out our Patreon page down in the description. Thanks.